Good morning, everyone. Today we have an amazing guest in our show, Design Makeplay. My name is Carla Vecino. I'm the producer. Today, our Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Jonathan Wilkinson, who is also represented as a member of the Parliament for North Vancouver, right?
Yep.
Okay, Minister, really, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Minister, I have a question. When I was just going through the bio and checking, I saw that you were so good a student. You were to the best universities ever. So could you just tell the audience what was the secret when you were little?
Well, I'm not sure there's any secret. I think the secret to learning of any kind is being interested in what you're learning. And I was very fortunate that there were lots of things that I did at school that I was very interested in. And I think that's the secret to success for anybody. So,
do you know kids? Oh, Minister, can you please tell us why you decided to work in the public sector after working for more than 20 years in the private sector? It was kind of impressive moving.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a long time in the private sector, and I've only been in politics for 5 years. I still don't refer to myself as a politician. I got into politics mainly because I was concerned about climate change, and I was concerned that the government that was in power before 2015 in my mind, didn't do enough to fight climate change. And so I used to run technology companies that focused on environmental issues and focused on how do you use technology to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So I decided that I complained a lot about the things I didn't like what the government did. And a friend of mine one time said to me that that's all well and good, but I've heard you say that many times before, and what are you going to do about it? And I decided to run.
That is perfect. A lot of our viewers are kids, youth, and families. What kind of actions do you think that kids and families can do in our community to contribute to protecting the environment?
Well, I mean, there's lots of different elements about protecting the environment. Some of them relate to climate change. Some of them relate to plastics and other kinds of waste that we use in our households. Certainly on the climate side, people can make a decision to drive a car that's more fuel efficient or that doesn't emit any carbon at all. They can take more public transit. They can ride their bikes. They can turn down their thermostats so they use less natural gas. They can refit their homes so that they're more energy efficient, so they can reduce the greenhouse gases they generate. There's lots of things they can do. I would say kids can actually help by advocating to their parents and their grandparents about why it's so important that we fight climate change, because they're the ones who are going to inherit this crisis if we don't do something about it. And with respect to waste and plastics, I mean, it's use less plastic and find ways to use other things. Make sure that we're dealing with waste in the right way, where we're recycling some of the products that we use on a regular basis. We're separating the organics so that we can actually reuse the energy that's in them. So there's lots of things you can do at the household level, and then be an advocate, be an advocate for doing more.
Oh, that's perfect. Could you tell us a secret? Are you going to bike, work from home to work? Are you biking?
I bike sometimes, but I also made the decision to acquire a vehicle that doesn't emit. So I drive what's called a fuel cell vehicle. So you put hydrogen in one side and it uses oxygen in the air, and all that comes out the back of the car is water vapor. So there's no carbon whatsoever. So.
Perfect. Okay, this one is COVID. With COVID, a lot of small businesses are just focused on survival, right? And what kind of things do you think small businesses can still do make sure to protecting the environment isn't forgotten amidst the crisis?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has been a very challenging time for businesses. It's been a very challenging time for individuals and families, for sure. And there are many small businesses that certainly are struggling to survive. And of course, that's something that they have to be focused on before they focus on anything else. But there are lots of things that businesses can do, even in the current context, that actually don't cost money, that save money. Things like making sure that you're using energy wisely and reducing the amount of energy you use by turning down the thermostat or a range of those kinds of things. About the kind of purchases that you make, where you're purchasing products that don't use a lot of plastic and those kinds of things. So I think there's lots of things that businesses can do, and I actually think that it's increasingly important that businesses are a voice for sustainability, that they actually are saying, These are important things for us to do for the future of the planet, and they're things that we can do that actually don't cost a lot of money. I actually had a meeting, these are not small businesses, but I had a meeting about a month ago with many of the larger producers and users of plastic products who are actually advocating for a zero plastic society. Those are people like Canadian Tire and Walmart and Coca-Cola. So I think increasingly businesses are understanding that acting in sustainable ways actually can be good for business.
That's perfect. About environment. Recently we found an article on BCC. It was posted on July 20th, more or less, and it says that globally we are using more than 100 billion face masks and 65 billion plastic gloves every month. So what is the government doing to ensure that the COVID crisis is not going to increase the landfill and contaminate the oceans and increase that contamination?
Yeah, it's a big emerging problem, and it's not just a big emerging problem in Canada. I talked to my counterparts in many European countries, and they say the same thing, that there's increasing amount of waste that's ending up in our natural environment that comes from medical equipment, medical PPE. And so we need to do some things to address that. There are probably two different routes you can go. One is finding ways to ensure that the waste ends up in the waste streams where it gets disposed of properly and not in our waterways and on our land. But the other is probably more interesting. It's about finding ways to use substitutes for plastics and other things that are biodegradable. Actually, I saw some of the products here that actually are made by materials that are biodegradable. This is something that is an increasing issue. I actually am meeting with all of my provincial counterparts next week, and that is something that we put on the agenda just a couple of weeks ago, is we need to actually work together, the provinces and the federal government and the territories, to come up with solutions for this problem before it becomes a bigger problem, and it will if we don't do something about it.
Yeah. This one is about supply chain. With the COVID-19 crisis, we learned how fragile the global supply chain is, right? And does the government have a strategy to improve the local sourcing of important items so this situation doesn't occur again?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has exposed a bunch of broad issues about supply chains, but I think the most important ones are supply chains relating to medical equipment and supply chains relating to food. And I think that there's some really important lessons that we're going to have to take away from this crisis as to how we think about what we're doing in some of these really critical spaces going forward. With respect to medical equipment, there's already a lot of progress that's been made. So the government has made significant commitments to companies that have actually switched their equipment over to producing medical equipment. Some of that is in a place like this, but Arc'teryx here on the North Shore is doing the same thing. And about half of all of the PPE we buy right now is Canadian made. At the beginning of this, it was a tiny fraction of that. And certainly going forward, I think it will be very important that we retain that capacity.
Good to know. You are really active on social media. I really follow you. I've seen all different small businesses that you have been visiting through time. Would you like to highlight any of those initiatives that you have in there? And really interesting, and they're really large.
So, we use social media channels for a number of different things. One of the most important over the last few months has been highlighting a lot of the programs that have been put into place to help families and to help businesses, so that people were really aware of what kind of support could be available to them to help them to get through this crisis. But we also use it to highlight success stories in the riding, interesting stories of people in the riding, and also to highlight some of the things that the government's doing. I mean, I am the member of Parliament for North Vancouver first and foremost, and part of it's about telling stories to people who live in the riding about what goes on in the riding. I'm also the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, and so I also use the social media channels to try to communicate the importance of the issues around climate change and broader sustainability issues to ensure that people have information on which to make informed choices and decisions.
That's perfect. Would you like just to send a message to all families, kids who are watching now the show and telling how they can engage with the environment and get moving forward with those initiatives that maybe the government or the small communities are having around?
Well, there's lots of different ways, and people are always coming up with new and creative ways to engage. I actually, later tonight, I'm doing a session which is called For the Kids. And it's a group of parents in North Vancouver who have actually arranged for a town hall, which is to talk about the future of the planet and the future of climate change. And it's both kids and their parents actually coming together to advocate. So there's vehicles that people come up with themselves. Within the schools, most of the schools have green teams now that actually work on environmental issues. There are shoreline cleanups. But I would say, especially with respect to kids, I never say no to going to an elementary or high school. If they ask, I go and have a conversation. I always find it very interesting to talk to young people about their perspective on the world. And I will tell you that young people as a group are far more concerned about environmental issues and particularly about climate change than older people. And that's because I think they recognize that they are the ones who are going to inherit what could be a terrible mess if we don't actually take action. And so what I always say to them is, if you really feel that way, then the people you need to convince are people in your network, your parents, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, your neighbors, about why it's so important for them to take action for you. And I think that's one of the things that I would say to young people is, be your own advocate in your own community.
So you hear, kids. So thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for being here. Thank you. Really appreciate your time. You know that your agenda is super busy. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, everyone. Thank you for being here today. See you next time with more Design Maker.